Hello everyone, welcome to AG Triathlon. Today we're doing a race recap episode with 2021 Ironman World Champion AG Matt Kerr. Welcome Matt to the podcast.
Hey mate, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Pleasure to have you on the podcast. Massive congratulations for your victory. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks firstly for having me and good to connect. Yeah, awesome, thank you. So I'm age grouper, triathlon. I'm in the 30 to 34 age bracket. So I'm from New Zealand. I'm working part-time as well as triathlon as a second as well. So I'm a school teacher. Specialise in physical education, outdoor education, living primarily, I guess, in New Zealand, but spending quite a bit of time through our winter months living in Australia as well, and making the most of the training and racing going on over there.
Very cool. So a couple of days ago, you won the Ironman World Championships in St. George in a thrilling race, right? You only won by 22 seconds over second place. So tell us about the race.
Yeah, it was a challenge. I mean, it was my first World Champs that I'd attended, and it was a big trip for me. You know, like we travelled quite a way to get there and put a bit of prep into it, so it did have a bit hanging on it. But at the same time, I knew that I needed to go in there and sort of race my own race and do my best, and that's all I could do, and the result on the day would be what it would be, and I couldn't control the other athletes, so that was mindset going in, but sort of with the underlying intention to finish, you know, as far up the front of the field as I could, and I knew if I could execute that well enough that we'd be pretty close. It was a hard day. It was a tough race. Definitely the toughest course I've been on. You know, it was a cold swim, it was a hilly bike, and it was a hilly run. So and that combined with a bit of altitude and heat definitely made it for a challenging day and a lot more variables to consider than say your typical sort of flat-ish Ironman race. So lots of considerations going into it, and just as a matter of executing those on the day and actually being intentional around the racing that was going on.
Yeah, so going into the race, you actually didn't have the ambition to win, or that was your goal, and then, you know, you were being a bit humble to yourself in the sense that you didn't want to raise the expectations too much?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the goal was always, deep down, is always to be at the front and be number one and come out number one, definitely. But, you know, international racing's hard when I've sort of had limited, I guess, experience in that area and not knowing who was going to be there on the day and what was going on and not in control of those guys. So there was a little bit of pressure there, but at the same time, as an athlete, I didn't need that pressure to overwhelm my sense of racing such a race with significant status, if you know what I mean.
Sure. So tell us about the swim. How was the start for you? Did you get a clean start, or were you blocked up a bit at the beginning?
Yeah, the swim was pretty hectic, to be honest. So it was in that 30 to 34. We were the fifth wave off. So we had 5 groups of athletes off before us, and yeah, sort of out to that first can was a constant stream of athletes that you were swimming through. That mixed with a bit of sun from the sunrise made it, you know, quite a hard start for the swim. Then on in, they'd come through in bubbles and bunches, and you'd be swimming through like these hives of athletes, either, you know, typically probably the back end of the age group fields and some of those. So it was definitely the most congested swim I'd been in, and it was challenging. It wasn't a straightforward swim. So I guess I did have a bit of a plan to try and stay with some of the guys that I was racing in that age group. But before the first can, I had eyes on their cap colour, and that literally disappeared really quickly, just given the amount of people that you're trying to swim through and actually try and navigate a straight line to the can rather than keep an eye on potentially either staying with a group or on someone's hips. So it was a bit of a frustrating swim, but it's just the way it was. So got through it and yeah.
So did you have a sense after the swim where you're at, or someone telling you, or you just go straight on the bike and?
Mate, no idea, absolutely no idea. So yeah, straight out of the water into T1 and get that stuff off, changed, helmet on, and into your work basically.
Yeah, and then you start your bike, right? I mean, Lionel Sanders said that for him it was all day long an individual time trial. That he wasn't trying to get influenced by race dynamics, but the type of course that it is really, requested more of an individual effort. Was that also your approach, or were you trying to look for some groups to maybe hang on to?
It definitely was for the first half. Really a kind of, individual time trial, I guess, is a pretty clear definition of what the first half of that ride looked like for me. As I say, I didn't know where I was on the field. It was the first part of that bike was all pretty quick, so getting some sort of info and splits as to where you are was difficult to get, let alone probably the accuracy of it, and where everyone was on the course was probably not that valuable anyway. So it was just a matter of chipping through people, riding through, and seeing how far forward you could get as fast as possible, really. And then I guess, that second half of the bike, it started to thin out a little bit, and you'd start riding through people that maybe you'd stay with a little bit longer, or they'd stay with you a little bit longer. And that was, I guess that was a lot easier, but at the same time, it was sort of riding up to them, and then if I was riding with them for a bit, I was actually probably gaining on them if I were to them to start with, so I probably should keep riding. So that was a bit of a learning experience essentially. I've ridden to them, I should just be riding through them instead of either they staying with me or me staying with them.
Yeah. So was there at any point that you got a sense during the bike that, okay, now I'm at the top of the field, like this is where I want to be, or?
So that second half, later in the second half of that ride, I got a little bit of feedback that I was sort of heard I was top six, or might have been sixth. And there was a bit of disappointment with that, the fact that I thought I'd ridden through more than enough people to be placed sixth. But just sort of carried on my work, and I guess throughout, if I look back on that power file, I was with a group just before that Snow Canyon, that last climb, and that was probably where I flicked a bit of a switch and burnt some matches that I knew that I had, to get that climb and try and make a significant gap on some of those guys that were coming through just on Dixie Hill there.
Perfect. And tell us about, if I want to become world champion, then what type of wattage do I have to hold on the bike?
I believe I underrode, and I probably could have put out more to come out with a faster bike split, and I was capable of doing so. As I say, I think that whole aspect of the wave started not quite knowing where you were allowed for a little bit of drop in the power for me. It was a tough course to maintain a consistent power, looking at descending at a speed and staying on that power. So I guess for me the power was reasonably low for that course. I think I finished with normalized of 265 or 266. So not out the gate crazy, but definitely the negative split there was higher power than the first half of the ride.
Yeah. So that's interesting, right? You use normalized power over average power. That's because normalized power is a bit more accurate in telling you the power that you actually did when, like, accounting for descents and things like that, right? Is that how you look at
Correct.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Super cool. So then you get into T2. What position are you in? And once you run out, how are the legs feeling?
Yeah, so I ran out on fifth, and hey, I was feeling pretty good, not too bad. I knew I had some work to do, and like the run for me is it's not a struggle, it's not a battle, and I've worked pretty hard over the build into here to make some improvements. But that's definitely been a disappointment in my last races is the run segment. So I knew that I hadn't ridden to a maximum full potential. I was probably in the best shape that I could be, which helped the mindset essentially. So yeah, came out of there fifth and just settled into my work for the first couple of K. We sort of climbed up that main street and gave those Ks away. Essentially, it's just like get the legs moving. Don't consider too much as to what those splits are. And by that third kilometre, it's like, wow, I should be well into my work by here.
Nice. And then you ran a 2:57.57. So let's say that's 2:57, right? That always sounds better. Tell us about taking the first spot, because ultimately you won by what, 22 seconds. So tell us about making the pass for first.
Yeah, seriously, it wasn't until sort of the last 8K that actually became a factual thing that it was going to be a possibility. I had some pretty accurate splits on the day, which was helpful. That was sitting in first was significantly down the field. He'd started a lot earlier, so I was never going to see him on the course. And I got myself into third. I knew that second he wasn't making gains. He was actually getting slower. So it was just a matter of time before I get into that second place. And actually, at one point, I had a differential of 2 minutes on foot. And then at about 10 to 12K to go, that had been pushed out to 4, so I'd let that slip back to 4 minutes. I think the split I got accurately was about 3:58. And yeah, the words I think by my supporter was, he's going to make you work here. You've got to get into your work, and he's going to make you work for this one. So it was pretty much just at that point, I had 10 or 12K to go, and I had to use those Ks to make as much progress as I could. But the fact was that we were running equal pace. He wasn't slowing down. I wasn't making gains on him. We were keeping that gap. So something had to change, and that was a point where I just sort of said now or never, and had to go for it and step it up a little bit, make it hurt a little bit more. And at that point of the race, it's probably the most suffer you're going to feel. So that 4 minutes came down to about 2, and then it came down to 58. And I think about 2K up to go. It came down 22 seconds, and then the last split I got coming down Main Street was you're down 3 seconds. Go. So just poured it all into it, and sort of just ran through that last aid station. And as you do for most, to slow down and grab a cup, but that was grab what you can at sort of a 3:50 pace and carry on and hope for the best. So it all worked out.
Yeah, so the interesting thing here is that second place was in the 40 to 44 category, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you were having kind of a virtual battle, right? Because you didn't start at the same point in time, so you were kind of having to do that math in your head, and your supporters had to do it for you, right? That okay, how am I doing compared to him?
Yeah, so yeah, I never saw him on the course at all, which was and I got that feedback quite early on, is that he's in the 40 to 44, and you will not see him. You will not see him, but this is what it looks like on paper. Get going, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's quite something, right? That at the end of an Ironman, you're still having to have a fight with someone that you don't fully know if that's actually correct or not, right? I mean, it's not like they're right in front of you or right next to you.
Exactly. So yeah, it was a different one. I mean, I would have loved to have also had that flip round and reverse. You know, what would the race actually look like if it was head to head, and we were battle for battle there and then, and how would have that played out? So, but yeah, sort of speaking to him afterwards, I think he was aware of the time as well, so he might have got a bit of feedback too. So it's all interesting.
Very nice. Talk us a bit about nutrition on such a tough course. What was your nutrition strategy going in?
Yeah, you know, like I guess I consider myself a reasonable high fat burner essentially, or well fat adapted. So for me, I knew the range, the zones, the powers that I needed to stick with in order to enough fuel to get to the end of the race and sustain that. It was hot. It certainly got hot on the run, and I guess the hottest part for me on the bike was that Snow Canyon. That was, you know, as I said, the last 30 odd K of that ride. So you're certainly pouring buckets by then. In terms of nutrition and what I did, I was just supported there by S Fuels, which is fantastic, and they're the sponsor of me, so that's the product I was using to get my race fuel in, both on the bike and the run, and it was just in the consumption of gels and liquids. I was using the aid stations for the water bottles. I think I might have picked up one Gatorade on the ride and shoved it in the badge, but otherwise it was their product and using that as efficiently and frequently as possible. So I think, you know, on the bike I was pretty stringent about that 20-minute block rolling through. I was getting around that 20 carbs intake there as much as I could. That definitely pushed out towards the end, and sort of, I guess, in that run, what pushed that block out to 4 minutes from 2 minutes was you had a bit of a twitch of cramp there, so I had to stop and stretch that out, and that's what accumulated the time. So for me, that was a matter of I had to get more salt in me because I was eating too much. So I was taking salt tabs throughout the entire race, and staying on top of that was pretty important because I have had issues with that before in hot races. So I knew that going into here, and I've trained with that, and we've tried to work on that. So that certainly paid dividends in that respect.
Perfect. So tell us about that winning feeling. I guess once you got into the finish line, you weren't 100% sure you won yet. So tell us about the moment you found out and what it meant to you after so much training that you've put in. And of course, in New Zealand, you had quite hard restrictions as well. So finally getting out after 2.5 years to do a World Championships.
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic that we could even get to World Championships and get going there. So it sort of felt like even just before the race started that when you get to the start line, things are pretty positive anyway. But in terms of running through that finish line, it was I guess I had a bit of an idea, and it probably wasn't until I got to the recovery lounge and actually grabbed someone else's phone there and just and had a look at those splits and what one was that it was, I guess, confirmed as such that I came in that 22 seconds before the other athlete there. So hey, it felt good. It was I put a lot of prep into it. I actually spent 2.5 weeks in Cedar City before that, just trying to eliminate the variables of heat, get on the course, bit of altitude training, and get the travel out of the way and finish the last pit of that block before we start racing. So yeah, definitely a bit have gone into it, and I think paid a bit of detail to the course to actually what we had ahead of ourselves, rather than just treating it as a general Ironman race as such. So we're quite specific around the training and planning and what that looked like, and the different rules and sticking to power, where you could possibly burn some matches that you shouldn't. So the build was pretty specific, pretty intentional, and I guess that just helps on race day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt, massive congratulations on becoming the world champion of our sport in Ironman. Phenomenal race. Wishing you all the best for the rest of the season. I'm guessing we will see you in Kona to defend your title. So best of luck with that. And thanks for being on the show.
Awesome, mate. Hey, thanks for having me, and look forward to connecting, and maybe we'll see you later on in the year in October.